a little bit about the 1976 Constitution, because the book Belonging and Identity starts off with the 1976 Constitution. So with that foundation in mind that I just laid, we can now look at how belonging was structured historically in the Virgin Islands. And the 1976 Constitution was created. It existed for over 30 years before the 2007 Constitution came in force. So the 1976 Constitution created one unified category in belonger. There were no subclasses of belonger, no generational restrictions on belonger status, and there were no ancestry-based limitations under the 1976 Constitution. So, once a person became a belonger under the 1976 Constitution, their status was equal, meaning that they enjoyed the same category of rights as other belongers. It was stable, and it was also inheritable, meaning that it could have been passed on to a child, your children. It was also secure, meaning it formed a clear legal basis of planning lives. So belonging, regardless of how they acquired their status, persons acquired their status, they stood on the same constitutional footing under the 1976 Constitution. So over time, this created a reasonable expectation in people's minds about what belonging meant. So the 1976 Constitution granted belongers clear rights, including the right to vote, the right to stand for office, the right to reside and remain, and economic and social privileges. And so many people who became belongers before 2007 still carry the reasonable and legally recognized expectation that belonger rights are equal, stable, and inheritable. And so this expectation shaped major life decisions, and decisions such as family planning, migration choices, and investments. And also it shaped our identity. It also shaped decisions in long-term personal and economic decisions. So now that we've spoke about the 1976 Constitution, we will now move on to the 2007 Constitution. So as we know, constitutions do evolve. And in 2007, the Virgin Islands adopted a new constitutional framework which guides us today. With that new framework came structural adjustments in how identity was defined. And for the first time, the Constitution created a distinction between belonger and Virgin Islander. So under the 2007 Constitution, a Virgin Islander status is defined and tied primarily to birth, ancestral descent, and ancestral descent. It applies to belongers who are born in the Virgin Islands and have a parent or grandparent who is a belonger by birth or descent, or born abroad to a parent who is a belonger by descent. And by contrast, this means that belongers by marriage, belongers by grant, naturalized belongers, long resident belongers. So say even after perhaps 20, 30, 40 or 50 years of residency and contribution, And even though they are legally belongers, these individuals are not considered Virgin Islanders under the 2007 Constitution framework. So, the 2007 Constitution introduced distinctions within belonger status, which affect generational pathways and identity. And broadly, the framework now reflects two constitutional defined pathways of belonging. Belongers connected by birth or descent are eligible to be recognized Virgin Islanders, and generational transmission is constitutionally structured. And belongers connected by marriage, grant, or long residence are recognized fully as belongers, but they do not fall within the constitutional definition of a Virgin Islander. And the generational pathways operate differently. So, the result of the 2007 Constitution is a more detailed constitutional structure governing belonging and identity. So we can now look at how identity was restructured again in 2007. It reshaped how belonging and identity are defined in law. And in particular, there were greater emphasis which was placed on birth and descent. The constitutional term Virgin Islander was formally defined under the 2007 Constitution. And generational transmission of status became more specifically structured. So for some families, this represented a shift from the earlier unified framework which had existed under the 1976 Constitution. So understanding this structural evolution is essential to understanding constitutional development in the Virgin Islands.